I want to move over to the situation with Maine. As you know, we had the Maine caucuses, and even though Ron Paul was expected to win going in, Mitt Romney magically came from behind and was declared the victor by Maine's GOP leadership. And I think the photo on the front page of the New York Times really said it all, where it shows Mitt Romney there smiling and waving, and the entire wall behind him is just plastered with Ron Paul signs. And Mitt Romney's out front saying, yes, I am victorious again. Well, even Ron Paul's people couldn't pretend that this one wasn't crooked. And the first thing that happened, of course, was that county up to the north of Maine that postponed its caucus for a week because of inclement weather. The state, and that was the county where Ron Paul was expected to do best. The Maine GOP just said, well, we're not going to count you. Too bad, you didn't play by our rules, we're not going to count you. And then more analysis, because the online tallies of the individual counties, precincts, were showing Ron Paul with like a 10% point lead. And people say, how the heck could Romney pull a victory out of this? And it's looking like Ron Paul's votes were shaved off by 15% across the entire state, which ought to bring back memories of where Pat Buchanan's totals in the Iowa caucuses were magically reduced by 15%. Now, some of these chairmen of the caucuses at the county level are going public. The chairman of the Belfast caucus in Maine called the state's GOP to confirm the vote tallies, and they're not even close to the actual vote. These caucus leaders are calling in to say Ron Paul won this precinct, and the GOP is saying, no, our number shows that Mitt Romney won. Well, of course, that's not supposed to happen. And apparently where these caucus chairmen are calling in and saying, we counted the votes in public, in front of witnesses, and Ron Paul won, and now the GOP is starting to say, well, I guess we'll have to take another look at that, which is a fancy way of saying, just wait long enough until everybody's forgotten about this, and then we'll still declare massive, massive vote fraud. I don't know. Maybe they thought they could get away with it because everybody was watching Whitney Houston. And by the way, this radio show does not do a lot of time on dead rock stars. I'm sorry. We don't. Or maybe they thought because nobody has started lynching vote riggers to this point, they don't need to bother hiding it anymore. But the fraud up in Maine is just in your face, where the people running the caucus itself are saying, you've got the wrong numbers. And the state GOP is saying, no, we don't. These are the numbers we're going to go with. And if you're a loyal party hack, you will go along with them. Basically, what the GOP has just told the voters is your vote doesn't count, especially up in that county up in the north of Maine. More than that, the GOP leadership is telling the rank and file Republicans, you don't count. You don't matter. We have already decided who the candidate will be, and it's not up to you anymore. If you're a Republican, you will just salute and do what we tell you. Comrade. Sieg Heil, Sieg Heil, Sieg Heil. So that's why we have that. Now, there's been a couple of cases of police brutality that really need to be talked about. Apparently, over the weekend, there was a shooting where this woman, Patricia Cook, died at the hands of a Culpeper police officer in Virginia. And he shot her, apparently emptied his gun into her car. Now, the sheriff's department... Basically, the state police department were saying that this woman, Patricia Cook, rolled up the window, catching the officer's arm inside, and then dragged him. And he was required to kill her in self-defense. And that was the story they put out there. And it was kind of a lame story because, first of all, if his arm is trapped inside the window, how does he get his gun from his holster? That was one obvious thing. Basically, this Patricia Cook is a Sunday school teacher. She was at this church applying for work. And when she was going out of the church parking lot, this officer stopped her, said apparently somebody had said there was a suspicious woman in the church parking lot. Now, I'll tell you, there's nobody more suspicious than a Sunday school teacher. Now, the officer is saying that he asked to see her ID, and she refused and tried to drive off, and that was when she dragged him and he had to shoot her. But it turns out there was a carpenter working in the next building up on the second floor with an absolute unrestricted view of what happened. And it's what he says is, no, this officer's arm was not trapped inside the window. This woman was just driving off, and the officer pulled out the gun and said, "Stop or I'll shoot," and just shot her. And then walked out in the street as the car continued to roll on out and basically emptied the gun into the car. And she's dead. Now this, I'm not buying this refuse to show her ID story, because if she was at the church applying for work, there's no reason for her to be confrontational about showing her ID. She hasn't committed any crime. There's no reason for her not to show her ID. And I noticed they're not putting out the name of the officer. And that makes me very suspicious, and I'll tell you why when we come back from these commercials.
Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And we're talking about the shooting of Patricia A. Cook in Virginia at the hands of a Culpeper police officer. The official story from the state police is that the officer stopped this woman in this church parking lot, demanded ID. She refused, rolled up the window, caught his arm, dragged him, and he was required to shoot her to save his life. He's being contradicted by an eyewitness, a carpenter, who saw the whole situation and said the woman simply rolled up the window and drove off, and the cop then shot her. He was not dragged. He was not in fear of his life. And the state police are still trying to say that refusing to show her ID was grounds for this officer to shoot her. Now, the problem I have with that story is she's a Sunday school teacher. She's in that church applying for a job. In fact, I think it was a volunteer position. She wasn't even getting paid. She was offering to volunteer. There's no reason for her not to show the officer the ID. And the other thing to keep in mind is every article I've seen on this, they give the name of the woman who died. They give the name of the eyewitness carpenter who saw it. But they're not naming the police officer. His name is not being released. And there's no dash cam from his car, no dash cam video. So I'm going to go out on a limb here, and I'm going to speculate that this officer asked this woman for something other than her ID. And she was insulted and drove off. And that's when he shot her. I want to know if there are prior complaints against this officer by women for inappropriate advances, because that does seem to happen an awful lot. But I find it very suspicious they're withholding this man's name. I guess they're worried somebody about doing a Google search and finding out that he's got a past record. Because I'm not buying this didn't show her ID. And she shouldn't be dead. Not by any stretch of the imagination. Now, hardly the only such incident. There's a very ugly story came out that's out in California. They shot this unarmed Marine dead in a high school parking lot in front of his two children. This Sergeant Loggins was inside his vehicle in the parking lot of San Clemente High School. He was returning home with his kids. Now, Orange County Police said that an officer tried to pull this guy over for speeding through the parking lot's gate. And the officials say Loggins ignored the deputy officer's orders and yelled at him. That prompted an officer to grow concerned about the safety of the children in the car. So, of course, if you're a police officer and you're worried about the safety of children in the car, what do? You take out your gun, you start shooting bullets into the car. That's their story. Actually, earlier in the day, the same Orange County Police had said the deputy feared for his life because Loggins was trying to kill him, I guess, with the car. And then they changed the story. Apparently they got witnesses there. And a week ago in New York, there was this other story where police shot to death an unarmed teenager in his grandmother's apartment in New York. The police are saying the 18-year-old was attempting to flush a bag of marijuana down the toilet. I don't know if they actually have the bag of marijuana or if it's a very happy toilet, but here's the important part. The boy was unarmed, and the police did not have a warrant to enter the home. The police are completely out of control in this country. Let's send them all to Greece. Greece are without a police department. They're all that austerity. They're having to fire all the police. Let's take our police and send them over there. Could hardly be worse than what they've got there now.